That's the whole idea.
Then he would end and go to pencil
All right.
class. Now he's
All right, we're doing history. We're on page 56. We just want to finish that up, and then I've got a little reading on Pony Express, and we're just going to talk a little bit. Here we go. Everyone ready? My dog collar. All right. Pretty soon it got to be a regular thing, traveling the Chisholm Trail. Herds of 2,000 or 3,000 cattle became common. Usually a dozen cowboys was hired to handle the herd, and a trail boss and a cook. The cook was important. Cowboys got ornery. Anybody know what ornery means? What do you think?
frustrated.
Frustrated. Yeah, they got frustrated. Yeah. If the coffee wasn't strong and the food decent. Like other Americans, cowboys were a mixture of some white, some black, some Mexican. Some like Jesse Chisholm was part Indian. Some were women. It was democratic out there on the trail. People were judged by what they could do, not by the color of their skin or the accent of their speech or their sex. Okay? Elizabeth Johnson was a school teacher in Texas before she bought some cattle and became a cowgirl. Okay? Which I was glad to know they just called them cowgirls and not cowboys. In 1879, she drove her own herd up the Chisholm Trail to market. When she died, 45 years later, she was worth more than $2 million.
She was? What?
Yep. Well,
Like her body?
No. No.
wow.
Like they're really
Yes,
stupid.
yes, she was, when they say somebody was worth X amount of dollars, they mean that's how much property or money or something they have. Yeah, they don't mean the actual body.
Bill Gates, 100 billion.
No, it's going for.
You
Well,
will
it's
love
gonna be worth for
for
yeah,
I'll take the dead body for 2 mil.
All right.
Uncle William.
When I die, it's gonna be the weirdest.
Most cowhands wore tight-fitting clothes, leather chaps, floppy vests, fancy boots, and broad-brimmed hats. Okay, clothes adapted from those of the cattlemen who had come to the western lands from Spain. Much cowboy lingo was Spanish also: chaps, lariat, rodeo, ranch, and even lingo. We did talk a little bit about their clothing the other day. We talked about how they wore their chaps, which was, of course, was leather pants that went over their outer pants, kind of. It wasn't real pants, but it just covered their pants. Because cowboys usually only had maybe one pair of pants. If they were really fortunate, they might have two, but most of them had one. So they had to protect them, okay? Because riding through the brushes and things like that, would tear them and just wear and tear, just general wear and tear. So they tried to take care of them. So they would wear the chaps when they were on the horses and things like that on cattle drives. They also wore vests. Okay, the reason they wore vests was, think about it, they talk about their pants was kind of tight fitting, okay? And you try to carry something in your pocket and you're riding on a horse
Yeah,
8, 10, 12 hours a day, it's hard to get into your pocket to get stuff out. So they wore vests that would, and the vest would have 4 or 5 pockets on it. And that's where they would actually keep a lot of the stuff that they would constantly be going for. Okay, it was that, that was where they kept it, was in the vest pockets. Okay, they also, was something we didn't talk about, and the book doesn't talk about, they wore leather gauntlets, they call them gauntlets, that covered their forearms, the ones that handled the ropes. Okay, just your average cowboy didn't wear these, but if the guys who did a lot of
Then
roping,
they could wrap it around.
yeah, it was made out of leather, and if they roped the steer and they needed something to help pull, they could wrap that rope around and that way when the rope slipped, it didn't cut through their shirt and their skin, okay? So it helped protect them, so they would do that. They would also use the horn on the saddle.
And they would wrap it around.
Okay, they would wrap it around, they would wrap it around that, and that would, then they
Or if
could
they
use
had
their horse weight against the cow to
Yeah.
help leverage a little bit.
And that takes a lot of
And
skill
then
Yeah.
sometimes
to keep your horse calm and like keep it to order and pulling it.
Okay, so that's what that horn was actually originally designed for.
But another thing is, like, if they had to get off for a reason, like if one of them were gonna have a baby or something, then they could tie it there.
Yeah, they did.
Tie the baby?
They did.
No, and no, you lasso the
The cow. We're talking about the
you
cow.
lasso the steer or the cow
All right. It was a lonely life they led, so they livened it up by singing around the campfire, telling tall tales, like the one about the cowboy who ran out of fence posts in a snowstorm when they had no fence, when they had the fence in the herd. So they hammered frozen rattlesnakes into the ground. See, that's a tall tale. It did not really happen,
Not a short.
but it is a tall tale. Okay?
That would've been awesome.
What's your fence made out of?
All right.
Frozen.
Well, they also used to tell one that this one has been around forever, because when I was in Korea, stationed in Korea for a short time, it would get incredibly cold in the wintertime, and we would joke about how to guys just coming in that had never been there before, we would tell them about how when you're out on bivouac, which is basically an army camping trip, when you talked, you would have to thaw your words out in a frying pan in order to hear what somebody was saying.
And they believe.
And people, yeah, you'd be surprised. I mean, people were like, what? All right, now, in Abilene, what happened to Abilene? It was the first of the Wild West towns, and maybe the wildest of them all. It had saloons, pistol-packing cow-punchers raring for a good time. A town like that needed a marshal, and Abilene got one of the most famous ones of all, James Butler Wild Bill Hickok. Okay, he had once been a bad guy himself, which was not uncommon for this time. Most of the lawmen at one point in time had been on the other side of the law, and sometimes they would be a marshal for a while, and then they would go back to the other side of the law, and then they would become a marshal somewhere else. So I guess the theory was, who better to catch a crook than a crook?
Yeah, because it was like, because he probably knows the best hiding spots.
Yep, you had kind of had that mindset, okay? So anyway, so he becomes the marshal in Abilene. He was a gambler. He did wear 2 pearl-handled pistols, and he was known as the fastest draw in the West. He could shoot the hat off of a man and keep the hat in the air with his bullets, and when it finally dropped, it would be rimmed with circles of bullet holes. At least that was the story that he told. Okay, he was also a short dresser who wore a coat with satin lapels. He parted his long hair in the middle, and he slicked it in his mustache with bear grease. Okay. Now,
Wait, is this the guy?
no, this is a real guy. He really was. He was, in fact, remember, stop. That's him right there. The one with on the left with the hat on. In fact, remember I told you, the movies and TV shows always shows them squaring up in the street and everybody. That was. I'm not saying it didn't happen more than once, but it was recorded just one time that it ever happened, and that was Wild Bill was one of the participants. Okay, a guy had beat him at poker the night before and had won his pocket watch. And the story is Wild Bill told him that was fine, but he better not see him wearing it in public, because that would, that would have been embarrassing for Wild Bill to have lost to this guy in a poker game. Well, the next day, here comes walking down the middle of the street is that guy with his Wild Bill's pocket watch on display. So Wild Bill challenges him, and the story has it that they were about 70 feet apart. Now that doesn't sound like a long ways, but with a pistol,
That is a long.
that's a pretty good shot, and especially with these pistols. Now, these are not the most accurate weapons in the world. So, but the story has it that they drew and Wild Bill shot him right through the heart from 70 feet. So he was a expert shot and a good shot. Okay. Wild Bill was paid a big salary of $150 a month. Okay, that's a lot of money these days. For keeping law and order in Abilene. He did a fair job for a while, although most of his time in his office was spent at the gambling table, actually. He was in a saloon, usually gambling. Then he shot 2 people. He'd done that before, but it just happened that one of them was his deputy. So the people the good folks of Abilene decided they needed to get rid of him and the cattle market also. So they trying to clean up their town a little bit. So Abilene settles down, becomes respectable, and after that, the Cowboys and their Longhorns heads for the new town, Wichita and Dodge City. Okay, and Dodge City becomes a wild town in the West. Okay. About 1875, Dodge City becomes the main railhead for shipping cattle eastward. Most say it was an even wilder place than Abilene. Now, it had peace officers also. It had Bat Masterson, who was a well-known officer of the law, and he later on goes to New York and becomes a journalist. Okay? And Wyatt Earp was the other one. Yes, dear?
Maybe so.
Yep.
There's pictures of all of them.
Yep, and you got pictures of all of them. Wyatt Earp was the next one, and he was another
Yeah,
one that
Wyatt
kind of,
Earp, yeah.
he kind of walked the line also, good guy, bad guy. But we're going to talk a little bit more about him later on. But he
actually like it. It was
yeah, he didn't die until like 1927. He moved to Hollywood, California, and met some of a lot of the TV and movie cowboy actors. Actually, kind of talked to him and tried to learn a little bit about the West from him because he actually lived it. I mean, he was the real thing.
How old was he when
Okay.
he died?
He lived a fairly good life. He was like up in his 70s.
Dang.
So yeah, that
Well,
was,
that was good until he got shot.
yeah. He was in a number of gunfights and he never got shot.
Did he, wait,
Okay, now his
wait, he
bro-
didn't get shot once.
okay, he never got shot. He was in one of the most famous shootout, or the most famous shootout of the Wild West, the shootout at the OK Corral.
They didn't even shoot
And
him.
Oh,
he-
yes.
he
They didn't
never-
even get the
He
chance to
didn't,
shoot
he
at him.
never got
They
hit.
shot
He
him.
didn't get hit. Most of the other ones either got killed or wounded. He was right in the midst of it and he never even got hit. He never got shot.
His
As many
brother-
shootouts and see what, he had a brother got killed,
Yeah.
one got crippled because he was ambushed, shot in the back with a shotgun. A lot of craziness,
That's not fun.
but that's why most of the shootings happened back in those days. It was not face to face, it was usually ambushes.
And it wasn't pulling up to the concert with a full automatic machine gun and shooting
No.
people.
Okay,
That's a clap.
so it shows you the pictures there of all of them. And then it gives you a little bit about Calamity Jane. She was another character. She was a good storyteller. People don't know how much of what she said was actually true because she did. She would tell some tall tales sometimes about herself. But she was 13 and she was an expert writer when her family headed west. It was a 5-month trip. She spent it exploring and hunting. And then her parents died about a year and a half later, so she had to take care of herself. She claims that at one point in time that she was a gold miner, a nurse, a Pony Express rider, an Army Scout, an Indian fighter, and a cattle hand.
How old was he, 220?
No, but back in these days, you would float from doing one thing into another and just, whatever. But it was known she was kind of the unofficial girlfriend of Wild Bill Hickok. They did travel around together and stuff like that. So whatever happened to her, I mean, they know what happened to her, but they don't know if some of those tales were true or not. What do you think calamity means?
Like,
Means troublesome. Like
Yeah, troublesome,
Chaos.
maybe clumsy, things constantly going on, okay? There's so many stories about how she got that name, it isn't worth the bother to tell them. But we do know that at 23, she joined an expedition to the Black Hills, and at 24, she was the only woman among 1,500 men in an expedition that headed out in Fort Laramie to fight the Sioux Indian tribe.
yeah, you don't
So
know.
she was the real deal, a little nutso perhaps, but the real deal. Yes.
She went to the Black Hills because the Sioux, they owned the Black Hills,
Mm-hmm.
and one single miner went there and found tons of gold, and everyone's trying to get on their land, and like Sitting Bull, I think was his name, and he was like, the Black Hills belong to me.
Yep.
They're not open.
Yep.
If you really want them, I'll see what you have to offer. But if it is not like an insane amount of liquor, guns, clothing,
Blankets, horses,
food,
yeah, anything that they could use.
and they said no to the offer, and everyone still came. And I think it was Roosevelt. Or, no, it wasn't. It
A little later on, they sent General Custer out there to run them off.
was, and then that ends.
Yeah, that didn't work out too well.
And then, like, the officers were trying to get the miners to leave because the president told them, hey, they said you're not allowed there, you can't. But the miners knew that the soldiers weren't going to do anything to them, so they just stayed in mines.
All right, let's talk about the Pony Express for a second. Okay. The Pony Express. Now, the Pony Express was a mail delivery service, okay, imagine this, that ran between Missouri and California, because that's halfway across the nation, okay? Using the Pony Express, mail could arrive in California in as few as 9 days.
Dang
Okay? Rather than the weeks it would take to arrive if it was sent by a horse-drawn carriage. Okay? The Pony Express used a planned-out route with a number of stations along the way. Now, these are pretty amazing. Riders would carry the mail from station to station, switching to a fresh horse at each station, okay? So the stations was usually somewhere between 8 and 12 miles apart, and he would get on his horse, and he would ride that horse full speed until he got to the next station. And he would jump off of that horse, and they would have a fresh one waiting for him. He would grab the saddlebags that had the mail in it, throw it across the back of that one, jump on that horse, and take off again, and ride again full speed until he got to the next station. And they did that, and he would put in about 100 miles before he would step down and another rider would take off.
Yeah.
Okay? So, and the horses, of course, had to be just flat out worn out by the time they ran full speed for that far. Because you think about it, horses, I mean, you know, I know all the movies and the TV shows, they show that they just run full speed just, you know, for days on end. They're a living animal. They got lungs, they got hearts. Seth said, man, that's, you know.
You can run them to death.
Yeah, you can actually run a horse to death.
You can run humans.
And they were probably pretty close to it, running one wide open for 8 to 10 miles. 8, 10, 12
How much do
miles.
you think they ran?
He's pretty tired. But then he was done. He didn't, you know, he probably got a nice rest before he had to go again, because the Pony Express had about 400 horses at their disposal. So it's not like they was using the same one every day. Okay?
They had
Otherwise they would have been out of horses in a
Thoroughbreds
hurry.
or quarter horses.
All right,
Because
now.
I like some of the
How much
fastest
do you think
breeds.
each drive would like a day?
And thoroughbreds have great stamina.
Well, he would ride 100 miles easy in his, I mean, it took him, think about it, they talked about it took him, 9 days to go from Missouri to California on horseback. They booked him. They're putting some mileage on that thing. Okay, the route used by the Pony Express went from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California. There was 184 stations along the 1,900-mile route. It followed the Oregon Trail 4 ways, then it used the Mormon Trail to Salt Lake City. Then the trail traveled over the Rocky Mountains, the Sierra Nevada Mountains, and finally into California. So that is not an easy ride either. The riders of the Pony Express made $100 a month. That's pretty good pay. It's also hard, I mean, you know, because they were riding through Indian Territory, the weather, I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen, okay? They thought that had pretty good money at the time. They worked hard, riding in bad weather, rough terrain, and in dangerous situations. Now here's the kick. In order to keep the weight down that the horses had to carry, the rider had to weigh less than 125 pounds.
What?
So you had a lot of riders that were young, tough, skinny teenagers. Okay? who were willing to face the dangers of the ride for the excitement of the job and the money that they could earn.
125.
125 pounds. Again, that's one of those things that the TV shows always shows these big bulky guys and they're all loaded down with their weapons and everything, and no, that wasn't the way it was at all. They were stripped down as much as they could as far as weight and stuff to get for good speed. Yeah. Okay.
Like those trails, who exactly like built them for them to be like for the wagons and stuff? Like how long would that take trails like through the woods and stuff to be built across?
Well, a lot of times it was just, I mean, they were just, the trails was actually developed by,
Indians and
they used the old trails that they had and things of that nature. And the more that wagons traveled over them, of course, the more.
And they just made trails all throughout the.
They just made trails, yeah.
I wonder if any of them are like still there. Like,
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I don't know.
I don't. They probably like overgrown now.
Oh,
if
yeah.
no one's touched them.
Or paved over.
Yeah. Or city over.
Yeah. All right. So when did the Pony Express run? I'm pointing to the back. I'm going to tell two people to get out of my class in about 2 seconds if they're not careful. When I do that, I will carry you back so you can see who it is. The Pony Express was a business. Despite its place in American history, it didn't stay open very long. It opened April the 3rd, 1860, and it closed October 24th, 1861.
Dang, that was
Okay?
really
At
long.
the height of its business, it had over 400 horses and around 180 riders. Okay? So why did it end? The Pony Express was forced to close after the opening of the Transcontinental Telegraph. Okay? Telegraphs could be sent much faster and was less expensive. And in the end, the business venture that was the Pony Express lost a lot of money and became outdated fairly quickly. So technology killed the Pony Express.
Wait, doesn't technology kill everything?
Okay? It's killing us right now. I mean, we're going brain dead because of it. All right.
They just thought it's like,
Interesting facts about the Pony Express. The first riders left from Sacramento and St. Joseph on April the 3rd, 1860. They each arrived around 10 days later. Okay, so that's the first outing. In the winter, the trip generally took around 2 days longer than it did in the summertime. Y'all want to watch see Seth with the book balanced on his head? He's adorable. I know, because all the other little boys are staring at him and giggling. The most famous Pony Express rider is Buffalo Bill, who earned fame putting on Wild West shows later on. Okay? The initial cost of a half-ounce letter was $5 to send it. That was a lot of money back in 1860. Prices was lowered to $1 for a half-ounce letter by the end of the Pony Express because they're trying to hold on. Only one rider and one shipment of mail was lost during the running of the Pony Express. And we're not talking he took a wrong turn and was late. We're talking they don't know what happened to him. Okay? Probably hostile Indians or something like
But
that.
that's pretty good if you only got one.
All right, let me finish up and then we'll take questions, okay? Riders would travel 75 to 100 miles a day, switching horses every 10 to 12 miles. The fastest delivery in the history of the Pony Express was 7 days and 17 hours. And it was delivered to President Abraham Lincoln.
No wonder it was so fast.
Yep. The Pony Express was started by William H. Russell, William B. Waddell, and Alexander Majors. So now you know more about the Pony Express than you probably ever wanted to know or will ever need to know, which is sad because it's kind of an interesting time. I love this period myself. All right, hope you enjoyed it. Bye.